As we get started, I'd like to start by asking you a simple question. There's a lot of people here, so there's no need to answer out loud, but think about it for a minute. How many pieces of fruit are in this picture? Now, our instincts are, as data people, to grab our calculators, run back to our desk, and start counting, right? And if we did that, we would all come back and we'd have different numbers. And in some cases, we'd have the same number, but for different reasons, which in a lot of ways is worse because that just creates the illusion of agreement, which eventually is going to come back to haunt us in the future. Are we counting the tomatoes? Are we counting the bell peppers? How about dried fruit? We have dried apricots in there. Do those count? And if we're counting the dried fruit, what about the bag of dried fruit? There's a picture there. Are we counting pieces of fruit and a picture of fruit and a picture of pieces of fruit? I don't know. How about the apples? So clearly that's fruit, but what about pieces? What's a piece? Is a slice of apple a piece? Or is it a fraction of a piece? Or is it something altogether completely different? Again, I don't know. So we're not equipped to answer this question until first we ask what it is that we're asking. So let's bring it a little bit closer to home. We're going to head to ancient Greece, and I'd like to ask you all to pretend for a minute, collectively, we are Aristotle. It's 2,300 years ago, and it's a big, important day. About 3 years ago, we sent 3 research assistants off to the far corners of the globe to study animals. And today's the big payoff. Huge amounts of time, energy, resources have been devoted to this effort. And so we're excited. We've reserved our favorite conference room in the Parthenon. We've pulled up WebEx on our stone tablets. Everyone shuffles in, and they begin to give their reports. So the first research assistant we sent off to the Amazon River Basin, which we don't even know about yet. And he specifically was told to study birds. So he spends half an hour telling us about all of the amazing characteristics of the incredible species of bird that he found that happens to navigate by echolocation and sleep upside down in caves. So clearly we have a problem. The second research assistant we sent off to the Pacific Ocean to study fish. And it's the same story. So the third research assistant we sent to Antarctica, again to study birds. And he comes back and he says, well, it took me forever to get there, and I spent a whole lot of money on expensive, very heavy clothing, but I didn't bother taking any notes because there are no birds in Antarctica. There's just this strange creature that doesn't fly at all, spends half of its time in water, and the other half of the time walking around on land in a tuxedo. All right, so obviously we have a problem here. We've wasted a huge amount of time and resources. We have nothing to show for it. We kick everyone out, and we sit and we think, because we're Aristotle, and that's what we do. So we have a communication problem. We're not capable of asking the questions that we want to ask. And we can't trust that the people we're speaking to understand the words that we're using. We're using the same words, but we don't know that they mean the same thing to them as they mean to us. When they report back their information, I mean, this calls into question not just this research, but all the research that we've done in the past. So now we have to wonder, is everyone even talking the same language, right? So what do? We call everyone back in the room, we put our heads together, and we become the father of biology. We invent the taxonomy of animals. Where would we be without the taxonomy of animals? How many hundreds of years behind would science be? How many thousands, if not millions of hours of circular conversations in zoology departments and all the universities for the last 2,300 years have been saved because we have this? We don't have to start every single question by re-explaining what it is that we're asking. Mistakes, you name it. We can't be Aristotle. It would be kind of cool to be Aristotle, right? But we can't be. It's already been done. We save time, and we also get to set the landscape by which all of the things after it is studied. So even though we can't be Aristotle, let's pretend for a minute that instead, it's 2019, you're in a conference room in Livonia, some guy has just spent a few minutes talking about fruit and Aristotle of all things, and then he goes on to describe his typical morning. So, I got up this morning and I did all my basic morning stuff, right? I'm getting ready to go. So I remote start my car. Now I get distracted. All right. So I'm distracted, so I remote start my car off now, or remote turn off my car, whatever the term is, right? So now I'm really, really ready to go. So I get outside and I start the car. Then I realize I forgot something, so I turn the car back off and I go back inside. Take care of my stuff, maybe turn off the coffee machine, right? Now it's time. I'm gonna go to work. Here we go. So I get in my car, turn it on again. This time I'm actually going somewhere, so I put it in the drive. I go down to the corner gas station, I get out, turn the car off, pump my gas. Now I want gas station coffee. I don't know, I romanticize it, go figure. So I'm gonna go get my coffee, but there's someone waiting for me at the pump. So I get back in my car, turn it on, put it in the drive. Excuse me, I go all of 10 feet, put it back in the park, but I'll leave the engine running. Go inside, get my coffee, come back out, get in, start up the car. Well, it's already started, so I put it back in the drive. Now I'm gonna head to work. So I drive to work, it's all of 2 minutes. I live embarrassingly close, I shouldn't even be driving. Get to the parking lot, turn off my car, but I listen to the radio for a little while. Sun's beating down, it's getting hot, so I turn the car back on, run the AC while I'm listening to my show, and now I'm finally done procrastinating for the day. I go inside. All right, so here's my question. How many trips is that? Are we even equipped to answer the question? Do we know what we're asking, right? We have, you should be asking back at me, well, what do you mean? Because otherwise we can all go back to our desk and we can all start counting trips, if not fruit, and we'll all come back with different numbers, or again, the same number, but for different reasons. So we have conceptual definitions, the concepts. These are the things that we care about, right? These are our fruit, our bats, our penguins, our trips, our vacations, our errand runs. And we have systems. And we have lots of systems. And the systems are just carriers of data. The data represents the stuff that we're interested in. That's the stuff that we want to study. The question is, we need one single conceptual definition for each of our terms. If we have more than that, then it's just pure chaos. But we have multiple systems. We need them to point out to the same thing. The question is, how do you go from one to the other? Now, initially, the answer is standards, right? But it's a little more nuanced than that. If you don't get it right, that bridge that you're building with the standards has to be built in the right order, or a disaster ensues. So we're gonna take a little trip down memory lane here. And one of my very first jobs at Ford Motor Company, I was called into a conference room, and they asked me to help fix stamping reporting. So we had a couple different problems at the time. One system, there were multiple systems being used in the plant. One system we're gonna call the Mona Lisa. It looked absolutely amazing, and it was incredibly easy to use, but it was built on kind of a garbage backend. Lots of problems. Now the other system we'll call the brick house. Brick house foundationally was strong, incredible backend, right? It had all the data, everything we needed to use in order to calculate our metrics. The problem was the front end, not so hot. It didn't look so good, and it wasn't easy to use. And we're supporting the plant environment, so ease of use is incredibly important. People are busy making plants. They don't have time to mess around with the crummy front end, right? So what do we decide to do? We're gonna take the data from all of the different brick houses that are running independently at all the different plants, pull it together into a central location, and then feed it into a new centralized web-enabled front end that was every bit as good as the Mona Lisa, if not better. Now, this was 20 years ago, so it wasn't technically all that easy, but even more difficult was just getting everyone to agree on what they were talking about. So uptime was kind of the main headline metric at that point, right? And we had two different systems, both are trying to represent uptime with the respective data sets. One system will represent with this orange, and the other system will represent with this apple. Now, apples and oranges, idiomatic expression, meaning that you're trying to compare dissimilar things, right? You can't do it. We had two different systems, and we had built our standards from those data sets up without considering what we were actually trying to accomplish. And then it got worse, because we had multiple use cases. You have multiple plants, and each plant has multiple departments, and each department has its own use case in each plant. Remember we talked about what is a piece of fruit? Well, what's time? When you're calculating uptime, time is very important, and everybody had their own definition of time based on what they were trying to measure. The problem was that's okay. It's okay to have multiple systems, and it's okay to have multiple use cases. That's entirely par for the course. The problem is when you're using those different systems and use cases to build your standards up to point to a word that no longer has the same meaning. Effectively, uptime was, everything was uptime. Everything was uptime. It was just the thing we're measuring now. So this is pure chaos. You can't communicate. Every meeting, you spend half of each meeting just re-explaining your terms and make sure everybody's on the same page. You're Aristotle before the taxonomy of animals, right? So what do? In order to be able to centralize this, we can't yet, we clear everything out and we revisit our definitions. Make sure that we start from our concepts, and then from the concepts, we can go back to our data sets, we can go back to our systems, and then we can build our standards up to meet that. And then we get to the point where everyone communicate. All that stuff that I said we couldn't do, we now can do. We can centralize. We can communicate with each other. We can trust our numbers. We don't have to constantly second guess each other, not because we don't trust each other, but because we don't know that we all agree with the same thing. So years later, I joined GDINA. I'm on the data observability team, and I ask what you would expect. What's a trip? And I get the answer, well, in plug-in devices, a trip is this, and in mobility, a trip is that, and embedded modem, a trip is the other thing, except when you're studying delivery vehicles, in which case a trip is X. But when you're studying retail, a trip is Y, unless you're in the mobility space, in which case a trip is actually Z. Okay, so we started again from our use cases, we started from our standards, and without looking up, this is the stuff that excites us down here, right? That's the things, the data, the systems, the technology. We get excited by that. But if we don't look up, look at the concepts that we're trying to define, we never actually get there. We end up with a single word that's being used over and over and over again, and we don't know what it means. It has no meaning. It's just simply the thing we're measuring now, right? Just like uptime. So what do? It takes a little bit more time. It takes a little more energy, but in the long run, it saves a huge amount of headache and a huge amount of error. Lots of mistakes, duplication of error, all can be prevented by remembering what we're trying to represent. What does that data actually point to? What are the concepts? Again, the fruit, the penguins, the bats, the trips, the errand runs. What are the concepts that we're trying to represent? And then once we've started there, then it's time to circle back down to the data sets and then figure out how they can build up towards those concepts so that we have one term or one definition for each of our key terms. Now, not every single system is going to be able to support every single term. Not every single use case wants to use every single term, but that's okay because we're building a taxonomy. And what does a taxonomy do? Not only does it save time, and we've spent a lot of time talking about that, but it also increases your vocabulary. So when one term doesn't fit your needs, you go to the taxonomy and you can pick from a different term. You don't have to redefine mammal because you're studying marsupial. You don't have to redefine trip because you have a new use case. Maybe more appropriate for you is a vehicle engaged event or an ignition cycle or something along those lines. So what do we do with this information? So first off, we've talked about manufacturing, we've talked about connected vehicle space, but this applies to everything. So it's particularly important in connected vehicles because this is a new field, right? All of this stuff is new, and we need to take a little bit of time to level set and make sure that we're all speaking the same language. But it applies to everything. So if you have issues where you're having to constantly re-explain yourself, if you have multiple systems that apparently are all working correctly but are ending up with the same numbers, maybe it's time to take a step back, revisit your concepts, and then take a look at your standards and find out what's pointing pointing where. And then within the connected vehicle space, we're building this taxonomy. It's obviously a work in progress, but the idea is to be able to level set so that you don't have to redefine trip every time you want something. Maybe what you want to do is look at ignition cycles, vehicle engaged events, things, the point where you start your car or the point where you open your door and the car comes on, but you haven't started the engine on. Those contain ignition cycles, which may or may not contain trips, which may or may not be a repark event. What are these? So these basically are atomic level definitions, right? What do you do with the atom? You build up to molecules. Once we've decided on our individual terms, and we don't have to redefine our meaning anymore or question each other, then those molecules, those atoms can be built up to molecules that start looking at larger concepts. For example, instead of limiting ourselves the trip to ignition cycles, et cetera, we can start looking at how they combine to make things like, to recognize things like commutes, round trips, commutes with errand runs, you name it. And then eventually we can figure out what this guy's up to. So thank you, and that's all for me.